Tonight, the royals and thousands of strangers united on the streets in silent tributes for the Queen. London bracing for 1 million mourners, queuing for kilometres as the monarch returns to Buckingham Palace within hours. The latest live. Tennis champion Dylan Alcott, one of 10 Australians invited to join the funeral procession. New airline turmoil for travellers heading into school holidays. And later in sport, Bulldogs star Bailey Smith reveals how he sharpened up his life after a drug scandal.
Live from Melbourne, 7 News with Peter Mitchell starts now.
Good evening. London is bracing for up to 1 million mourners and queues stretching for kilometres, with the Queen just hours away from making a final journey to Buckingham Palace. The monarch's children and thousands of strangers have already united in touching, silent tributes in Edinburgh.
In Edinburgh's St Giles Cathedral, 4 children who've lost their mother and father in the space of barely 18 months. The King, the Princess Royal, the Duke of York, the Earl of Wessex, Charles, Anne, Andrew and Edward, standing vigil at their mother's coffin. As Her Majesty lies at rest. This is a royal tradition since the death of King George V, difficult as it must be. Earlier, the Queen's coffin was carried from the Palace of Holyrood House. To the sound of the new anthem that now hails her son, the King. Charles and his siblings escorted the Queen's hearse up Edinburgh's Royal Mile. This ancient thoroughfare, in places so narrow the crowds were so close to their Queen and their new King. His Majesty carrying his Field Marshal's baton presented to him by his mother 10 years ago. Alongside him, the Royal Company of Archers, officially the Sovereign's bodyguard in Scotland. In the background, minute guns. Fired every 60 seconds as the slow march climbed the hill.
A family that has so far been able to grieve in private must now share their pain with the public. Tens of thousands of people here in Edinburgh, millions right around the world.
It sort of underlines the fact that it's very much a family affair. And this is a day for their family and the family of the Commonwealth.
For those who came from across Scotland and across the seas to be here, it was a day they will never forget.
We've been here for two to 3 hours, I think, to see it.
Honouring a remarkable monarch.
You could feel the love in the crowd. Yep, magnificent woman.
A sentiment almost universal here. Almost. A lone protester shouted at Prince Andrew before being shouted down by the crowd and dragged away by bystanders and police. But there was barely an interruption. Carried into St Giles by soldiers from the Royal Regiment of Scotland, the coffin adorned with a wreath of flowers, rosemary, white heather and chrysanthemums. And then the 16th century Crown of Scotland. This nation, once a standalone kingdom, today farewelling perhaps its most Scottish monarch in centuries.
Here at St Giles, John Knox confronted Mary, Queen of Scots. Here James VI argued about liturgy. Here Oliver Cromwell preached. Here Parliament sometimes met. Here our late Queen received the honours of Scotland, and the stone of destiny rested on its return to Scotland. We are graced by the presence of the King and members of the royal family.
And later, the Queen was joined by members of the public allowed to file past. They will for 24 hours.
And Europe Bureau Chief Hugh Whitfeld is in Edinburgh tonight. Hugh, many mourners are still waiting to pay their respects.
Peter, thousands of Scots and people who've travelled much further have been lined up through the night and into the morning. A queue that's moving pretty well, but stretches for more than 2 kilometres through Edinburgh's Old Town. People of all ages, all backgrounds. For many, passing by Her Majesty's coffin is an emotional moment. Scotland's history is deeply rooted in its relationship with the Crown, its own stories of Scottish kings and queens. Their new monarch, Charles, and Princess Anne have spent the night here at the Palace of Holyrood House ahead of Her Majesty's journey to London. Peter.
Hugh Whitfeld in Edinburgh, thank you. And Chris Reason is at Buckingham Palace where the Queen's coffin will arrive overnight. Chris, how are the preparations going there?
Yeah, good evening to you, Peter. Well, this is an operation the likes of which this country has never seen before. When the Queen returns here to London tonight, we're going to see levels of grief that we haven't seen yet. What we saw in Scotland will be dwarfed by what happens here. The roads from the airport here to Buckingham Palace are expected to be again filled with mourners, all building up into that procession tomorrow when Her Majesty leaves this royal residence, Buckingham Palace, for the final time to be laid in state for those next 4 days, an operation they rehearsed in darkness this morning. Buckingham Palace only hours ago. After 70 years of protecting the Queen, Coldstream Guards and the Household Cavalry rehearse their last duties for Elizabeth. 75 beats a minute, funeral tempo. At Wellington Barracks, more preparations for the saddest of duties. A prop casket in black borne by gun carriage. Royal troops practice a step-perfect final salute. In London, security is tightening, preparations ramping up. The Queen returns here tonight and tomorrow will begin a final journey through her empire's capital. It will be timed to the minute. The Queen's coffin will be placed on a gun carriage at Buckingham Palace, leaving at 2:22 p.m, making its way slowly up the Mall with members of the royal family and the King slowly following behind. The procession will happen in silence, but for the bells of Big Ben and the minute guns of the King's Troop artillery. From the state funeral for Sir Winston Churchill in 1965 to Diana's funeral in 1997, Charles and the City of London are sadly practised in regal farewells.
The scene on London's Lambeth Bridge this afternoon.
Hundreds of thousands turned out for the funeral of the Queen Mother 20 years ago, but it was the Queen's father who was the last sovereign to lie in state.
And following were the heavily veiled, grieving figures of the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret.
And now it's Elizabeth's turn. Countless mourners will come to pay their respects, packing a history-filled route. It will take precisely 38 minutes for that gun carriage to reach here, Westminster Hall. The coffin will be carried inside, placed on a catafalque before a short memorial service attended by the King and members of the royal family. And then they will throw the doors open to the public for 4 days of lying in state. The queue has already started. This woman, first in line.
I just want to make sure that I get the chance to pay the last respect.
The route takes in some of the most famous sights of London, past St James's Palace, up to Horse Guards Parade, through the Archway into Whitehall, past number 10 Downing Street, Big Ben, the Palace of Westminster, stopping at Parliament's oldest building. It's a route King Charles knows well. He drove an almost identical path for his historic address to Parliament. But tomorrow he'll have to walk it on what will be a profoundly difficult day. While up to 1 million mourners will share that burden with him. In London, Chris Reason, 7 News.
An emotional King Charles has held back tears as he faced Britain's Parliament. He's now preparing to make a historic visit to Northern Ireland.
Come one, come all for the King's Speech Mark II. Waiting in the ancient walls of Westminster Hall, a who's who of British politics and power, 1,500 Lords and MPs. After the very human response to the Queen's death, now would come the constitutional one. From Buckingham Palace came Camilla and the King for his inaugural address to one of the oldest institutions of all.
As I stand before you today, I cannot help but feel the weight of history which surrounds us and the tangible connections to my darling late mother we see all around us.
Among them, these precious glass panes, most recently restained for the Queen's Diamond Jubilee.
Like the light that shines through this memorial window, Her late Majesty's magnificent achievements will live on by permanently illuminating and enriching our lives and our national discourse.
From the Speakers of Parliament's two houses, a nation's grief.
Deep as our grief is, we know yours is deeper.
And the King's reply.
As Shakespeare says of the earlier Queen Elizabeth, she was a pattern to all princes living. She set an example of selfless duty, which, with God's help and your counsels, I am resolved faithfully to follow.
Like all great events, it went without a hitch. And while the King will be back, the Queen herself, seen here many times over many years,
my Lords, members of the House of Commons,
will visit once more as well when she lies in state in this great place 36 hours from now. Sarah Greenhalgh, 7 News.
Buckingham Palace has invited 10 Australians to attend the Queen's funeral. The Australians of the Year and Victoria Cross recipients, including Ben Roberts-Smith, will join the Prime Minister at the service in London.
Playing fetch with dog Toto before welcoming representatives of Commonwealth nations to commemorate the Queen, something Anthony Albanese will do formally at her funeral on Monday. The Palace asking for 10 ordinary Australians to accompany him.
The Australians who have been invited, I think, embody an extraordinary contribution to our nation.
Including horse trainer Chris Waller, who trained Chalk Stream for the Queen.
Chalk Stream has won it very impressively.
And spoke with her often about racing.
Huge honour, overwhelming really, so yeah, we'll be very proud.
Also invited Danny Abdallah, father of 3 of 4 Sydney children killed in 2020 by a drunken drug driver, and Australian of the Year Dylan Alcott. The others, 2022 Senior Australian of the Year Val May Dempsey and 2021 recipient Dr Miriam Rose Ungunmere Bowman, 2022 local heroes Shana Warne, Saba Abraham and Kim Smith, Young Australian of the Year Trudy Lynn and WA Australian of the Year Professor Helen Milroy. Anthony Albanese confirmed today he will have an audience with King Charles while in London and will also meet new British Prime Minister Liz Truss. Also invited to the funeral, Australia's Victoria Cross recipients Ben Roberts-Smith, Mark Donaldson, Daniel Kieran and Vietnam hero Keith Payne.
A beautiful friendship. It's saddening now that she's gone.
7 News understands the VC recipients won't be travelling on the Prime Minister's plane. Mark Riley, 7 News.
Victorian MPs have pushed for Australia to become a republic on the day they pledged their allegiance to King Charles. Charnel Vella is at State Parliament this evening, and Charnel, they say now is the time for change.
Well, that's right. The Victorian Greens have called the swearing-in ceremony absurd. They believe the Queen's death should be used as an opportunity to move towards a republic.
It is time to open this conversation, a long overdue one, about the need for our country to move on, to acknowledge the sovereignty of First Peoples and to get on with the republic Australia-wide.
I just don't believe it's appropriate at this time to be having that debate. That debate may well be appropriate at another point.
Now, the Victorian Parliament was meant to sit tomorrow as well as Thursday, but it has been adjourned as a sign of respect. It will resume next week. Mitch.
Chanel Vella at State Parliament, thank you. Jetstar cancellations have left Australian travellers trapped inside a Japanese airport for days. The airline's blaming runway debris, birds and lightning, but the passengers say they've been left to fend for themselves.
Stranded in a Tokyo airport terminal for almost 3 days.
We were deflated and then deflation turned to anger.
Victorian teacher Judy Jenkins is one of 22, desperate to get out.
This is ridiculous. The humidity in this airport is suffocating.
Every flight home since Sunday cancelled.
Unfortunately, we've had some challenges with our 787 aircraft, bird strike, lightning strike, and we've had debris on the runway.
Japan's strict COVID rules has meant they can't leave Narita Airport, so they're stranded in the terminal, sleeping on the floors and eating from vending machines.
I have type 1 diabetes as well, so I've just been on crackers and water.
And no baby food.
There are no Jetstar staff at the terminal, so getting information is hard.
We had no contact from Jetstar.
I just want to be treated as a human.
I feel like we're living that movie, The Terminal.
We're headed for home?
No, I am delayed long time.
It has been a bad month for the airline industry, with thousands left stranded overseas, including in Thailand and Bali, where many are still waiting for a flight home.
This is day number 10.
And with only 3 days until school holidays, passengers are hoping for the best and preparing for the worst.
Hopefully we don't get delayed, but if we do, we do.
Finally, at Narita Airport, some good news. A flight home for our stranded Australians via Singapore and fingers crossed for a trouble-free flight. Sarah Jones, 7 News.
Collingwood fans are vowing to take the long road to Sydney after they were frozen out by sky-high flight prices. But the Swans are planning to spoil their preliminary final party with some help from a footy legend.
Jim turns 102 next month. His sister Joyce is 97. Lifelong Swans fans, their favourite player.
Here's the one and only's here.
Warwick Capper, here on a surprise visit.
Give us a kiss. And my old mate here. 3 cheers for him. Happy birthday. Give me 5.
Good on you, Warwick. Joyce remembers Warwick too well.
I remember the sense of humour that he had and his behaviour was a bit queer.
Yes.
I never dreamt that I'd ever meet or speak to a South player.
And also a 100-goal Centurion player too, at that gym.
Shake down the thunder from the sky.
Jim and Joyce carefree, but not Magpie fans fretting about how to get to Sydney.
$1,000 returned, so we think we're going to hop in the car and get up there.
Many now resigned to the road.
My mate's got the black and white flag ready on the back of his ute, so hopefully we'll get a bit of attention on the freeway on the way up.
Even players are struggling to get their families to the game.
Every flight's pretty much chockers, but yeah, it's a bit of a logistical nightmare.
Come on, Joyce, don't be shy.
No nightmares for these Swans. They're confident about Saturday.
If they go out on the field knowing they can do it, they'll do it.
Onward to victory!
Nick McCallum, 7 News.
Warwick loves that jacket. It's judgment night at the AFL Tribunal. Tim Watson, a star Lion, is fighting to face the Cats in the preliminary final.
Mitch, Brisbane's hopes could hinge on tonight's verdict. Mitch Cleary is covering the hearing, and Mitch, the Lions have turned to a premiership captain to get Jared Berry off.
Well, Tim, they've called on former Lions star and AFL champion Luke Hodge for a Jared Berry character reference tonight. Berry himself arguing he was left in a vulnerable position by Clayton Oliver, and any contact to Oliver's face was simply accidental and not intentional, as the AFL tonight contends. The Lions have also called on an independent neurosurgeon who says Oliver left Berry in a vulnerable position and that he did or would have obstructed oxygen to Berry's brain in this incident in the MCG last Friday night. So still plenty to play out in this one. I'll be back for more in sport.
Thanks, Mitch. We'll check back in with you soon. Also ahead, Luke Jackson officially wants out of the Demons. Why his decision is set to unlock a flurry of trade action. And Mitch, the Bombers have narrowed down their search for a new coach too. That's all ahead in sport.
OK, Tim, thanks. We'll see you then. A new airline war has started, with Virgin teaming up with a retail giant to lure Qantas flyers to hop over. Details are next. Also coming up, a university lecturer's murder admission. Tributes for a Victorian icon. Later in sport, star bulldog Bailey Smith opens up on how a drug scandal changed his life.
And temperatures jump up tomorrow. I'll show you how warm and how long it'll last later in 7 News.
A Deakin University lecturer has admitted murdering his wife at their home in Melbourne's northeast. The killer confessed to the crime 5 months after being found with blood on his hands.
Once a communications expert, confident in front of the camera.
And you make the most of the opportunities that you have.
Today, Adam Brown was shaking and whimpering as he told a court he was guilty of murdering his wife. The former digital media lecturer at Deakin University admitted he stabbed Chen Cheng in the family's Croydon North home in April. The 35-year-old mother died at the Patrick Avenue property after neighbours reported hearing screaming. Their toddler son was inside. Prosecutors argued to obtain evidence from Adam Brown's psychologist, seeking further information about the couple's relationship prior to the murder. A prolific social media user, Brown had previously boasted about his wife online on International Women's Day. Far from the classroom, the killer teacher remains in a cell waiting to learn his fate, facing the prospect of a life sentence. Jade Vincent, 7 News.
Actor and musician Uncle Jack Charles is being remembered as the father of Indigenous theatre. Following his death at the age of 79, his family has given permission to use his image. He's the face of this year's AFL Finals campaign and enjoyed a long career in film and television. The award-winning performer died in hospital after suffering a stroke. Vale, Uncle Jack. The airline battle for customers is taking off, with Virgin making a bold pitch to Qantas frequent flyers. Passengers sick of cancelled flights and lost baggage are being enticed to switch with big incentives.
A moment of light relief in the cutthroat airline wars. Virgin inviting Qantas members to do a switcheroo.
We're feeling very confident that we've really improved over the last few months, and the time is right now for people to try that.
Frequent flyers with gold status or higher at rival airlines now offered a 3-month trial at Virgin.
I think it's a good time. A lot of competition between the two carriers, but I think it's going to get really heated domestically in terms of what they're offering.
After months of disruptions and poor publicity, airline loyalty is being tested. Sky-high fares not helping. Adelaide is the only capital from where you can still fly return to Melbourne for AFL Grand Final weekend for less than $500. From Perth, it's closer to $1,000. Fares to London also spiked after Queen Elizabeth's death.
Economy, somewhere between $4,800 and about $7,000.
As for business?
It will cost about $10,000 to $12,000 one way.
They're price gouging big time.
Virgin's bold push for customers is also behind today's launch of its partnership with Myer. Frequent flyers can now pay for more than 200,000 products at Myer's online store using Velocity points.
It is a lower value option, but we think it's something that people will find appealing given the current cost of living pressures.
Gemma Acton, 7 News.
Australian television's biggest night, the TV Week Logie Awards, are returning to the 7 network next year. A multi-year deal has been done for the event on Sunday, June the 18th, to be shown on 7 and 7+. The host city is yet to be announced. A pub in Melbourne's southeastern suburbs is copping a royal backlash over the death of the Queen. Hear what they have to say next. Also coming up, a bizarre abduction mystery in Melbourne's west. What you need to know about walking for your health, the new research on getting it right, and the late night kidnapping that's got a family's goat. A sketchy report from 2 children has led police to investigate an alleged abduction in 2017, despite the fact no one has been reported missing. The children say they saw this woman being forced into a Ford Ute in Tarneet, but didn't report it at the time.
I think it's important to make sure that this lady's okay and that she's safe, if we can identify her.
No one knows who the alleged victim is or even if a crime was actually committed. A pub in Melbourne's southeast is under fire for making light of the Queen's death. Staff used social media to convince young customers to take their grandparents out for a meal before it's too late.
Kelly's in Cranbourne tries to make its social media irreverent, but even they concede this stunt doesn't pass the pub test.
In retrospect, was it too soon? Possibly. But again, the major message is bring an old person out for lunch.
The bistro referenced the Queen's death to convince customers to bring their elderly relatives for a meal, do lunch before they die. Yep, he cancelled lunch. Next week never arrived for Granny Windsor. The marketing ploy didn't go down well. Not the slightest bit funny, grubby advertising, incredibly bad taste. The posts were deleted.
It's over the top, isn't it? Yeah.
Manager Michael Goldie emphasised staff have no ill feelings toward the royal family.
We want people to come have a good time, and basically that's it. It's not a long time. Everyone dies eventually.
The pub is hoping that regular patrons will see the posts in context with their previous advertising, which encouraged people to bring an elderly relative to lunch, given their socialising has been restricted because of COVID. Victorians continue to pay their respects at Government House. One royalist has spent $6,000 on flights alone to be in London for the funeral. Bendigo's Darren Martin last visited the UK to tour royal landmarks with his grandparents.
A very expensive exercise, but it's something that I didn't think twice about doing.
He said he feels like he's lost a family member.
It's probably going to seem really silly to other people, but for me it's just a feeling that I can't get rid of.
Emma O'Sullivan, 7 News.
The Australian Mint has confirmed the image of King Charles will feature on all newly minted coins from next year. Tradition dictates he will face the opposite direction to the Queen.
It will be a remarkable moment when Australia moves from having not a Queen on the coins, but a King.
There are currently no plans to replace Queen Elizabeth's image on the $5 note. There's renewed hope in the war in Ukraine has shifted decisively, with President Volodymyr Zelensky claiming his troops have retaken more than 6,000 square kilometres from Russian control. He says Ukraine's counter-offensive in the northeast has been such a success, they're running out of space to house Russian prisoners. For years, we've heard 10,000 steps a day is the magic number for staying healthy. But scientists say they've discovered there's a quicker way. New research shows you can get the same benefits with fewer steps, but there is a catch.
It was always marketed as the magic number.
So we're hitting 10,000 steps a day. Yes, you heard me right.
It was a nice, catchy, round number, and it kind of stuck with the public over the decades. However, it was never empirically tested.
It turns out 10,000 steps a day really is the sweet spot. But there's a cheat. You can get the same benefits by doing even less.
What we found was that stepping pace had additional benefits over and above total steps per day.
Researchers monitored 780,000 adults using wearable trackers. They found 10,000 steps dramatically reduced the risk of dementia, heart disease and cancer, but as little as 4,000 steps at a brisker pace had significant benefits too.
It is so important to get out there and do that purposeful walking to be able to offset the hazards of sitting for long periods of time.
But health experts also say there's nothing magical about walking. It could be dancing, running or cycling, whatever takes your fancy. It's the duration and the intensity that counts.
Friends that you might usually catch up with over coffee or lunch go, if you want to catch up with me, let's go for a walk. Suddenly when you're distracted, you actually don't realise how many of those steps that you've done.
Rochelle Brown, 7 News.
A Middle Park family is pleading for the return of a much-loved ornamental goat stolen from their front porch. The goat was kidnapped in the early hours of Sunday, September the 4th, by a couple seemingly on their way home from a big night out. The owners say they've also had a table and chair set stolen from their home. Our immune systems have taken a big hit in the pandemic. Next on 7 News, repairing our body's defences. Doctors reveal what we can do to rebuild. Also coming up, a petrol hit for the school holidays and red carpet glamour at the Emmys. Then later in sport, Bailey Smith on how he sharpened up his life after a scandal. Drivers are being urged to fill up now after a new petrol price cycle hit Melbourne overnight. Prices jumped by as much as 40 cents a litre to $1.95. The change comes just days before the school holidays.
It really is quite staggering, especially because the wholesale price is still hovering around $1.50. The regulator has said they'll be keeping a close eye on this, especially as the fuel excise comes off at the end of the month. But it does seem coincidental.
The most expensive fuel is in Melbourne's eastern suburbs. The pandemic lockdown stopped Victorians being exposed to the most common viral infections, and it's taken a toll on our immune systems. Doctors have revealed their top tips for boosting immunity after a long Melbourne winter.
Spring is here, yet we're still struggling to shake off the winter bugs.
Lockdowns have led to people's immune systems not being ready to respond to infections.
Usually also people are tired and stressed, which doesn't help.
The immune system is the body's first line of defence, preventing us from getting sick. Medical experts say the key to keeping it strong is simple and comes down to a healthy lifestyle. Sleep more, exercise, minimise stress, eat a balanced diet, and keep up to date with vaccinations. Vitamins are crucial to our immune health.
When we're deficient in certain vitamins, the immune system can't function properly.
Zinc, iron, vitamin A and vitamin D, while vitamin C in high doses has been proven to shorten the severity of a common cold. Thankfully, Victorian respiratory viruses are falling. There were 13,000 COVID cases in the last week. Before you rush out to stock up on your immunity-boosting supplements, experts agree that a healthy diet rich in fresh fruit and vegetables should do the trick. If you do need to supplement, that's best determined by a professional.
I don't think anyone should prescribe vitamins to themselves, so it's always better to save yourself time, money and health and see a professional.
There's no magic pill, it's all about balance. Sonia Marinelli, 7 News.
It's been a strong day on the share market. Network Finance editor Gemma Acton has more.
Thanks, Peter. After adding 45 points in today's session, the ASX 200 has closed above 7,000 points for the first time this month. Lithium miners were today's stars following a slew of positive comments from analysts. The Aussie dollar came within a whisker of reaching 69 US cents before starting to slide again this afternoon, while oil continues to claw its way back towards 100 US dollars. And for the first time in 2 years, the total value of housing stock in Australia is falling, down by $162 billion in the past 3 months, to clock in at just under a still staggering $10 trillion. Peter.
Thanks, Gemma. Australian actor Murray Bartlett has sent a message home as he took out a top honour at the Emmy Awards. He won for his role as an uptight resort manager in The White Lotus, which claimed the most awards, along with the comedy series Ted Lasso.
It's America's annual TV show all about other TV shows, and it had an Australian centre stage.
Murray Bartlett.
The 51-year-old, originally from Perth, the winner of the Emmy for his role in The White Lotus.
I just want to thank my mum all the way home in Australia for giving me the most wonderful foundation of unconditional love.
2 other Aussie hopes missed out. Toni Collette for The Staircase and Sarah Snook for Succession.
You know, it's just a bigger version of the Logies, isn't it?
The biggest winners, Ted Lasso and The White Lotus with 4 each. Succession with 3, Squid Game with 2.
I truly hope Squid Game won't be the last non-English series to be here at the Emmys.
Some had traditional acceptance speeches.
I'm deeply flattered.
Others were hilariously unprepared.
Well, first I gotta say, oh shit, because I didn't think this was gonna happen.
Lizzo, full of emotion.
When I was a little girl, all I wanted to see was me in the media. Someone fat like me, black like me, beautiful like me.
As usual, the fashion had heads turning, the stars ready to pose, with golden glamour, classic black, a popular choice for many. Men in suits, women in suits, plus a mix of fur and flesh. An industry happy to poke fun at itself.
Hermine, thank you for the Botox.
Paul Dowsley, 7 News.
Sport is next with Tim Watson. And Tim, big trade demands are stealing the final spotlight.
Mitch, not good news for Melbourne fans. Luke Jackson officially wants out of the Demons. Coming up, the reasons why and the dominoes now set to fall this trade period. Also, a star pie misses training with a moment of intrigue for another, the latest from Collingwood next. The coach backs Buddy Franklin to fire up after copping criticism, and the latest live from the AFL Tribunal. Welcome back. Luke Jackson's official request out of the Demons is set to unlock a flurry of trade moves. Melbourne is now in search of his replacement after Jackson asked to be reunited with family in WA.
Walking out on the club where he won a premiership 12 months ago, Luke Jackson was tight-lipped.
He doesn't want to comment at this stage.
The ruckman left the talking to club officials after requesting a trade to Western Australia.
We're disappointed to lose Jacko, there's no doubt about that. The conversations all year led us to believe there was a real understanding and want potentially for Jacko to head back home. And
Jackson told teammates about his decision at a player meeting, days after their premiership defence came to an end. The 20-year-old has been offered a 7-year deal by Fremantle, but Melbourne will work with both West Coast and the Dockers to facilitate a trade, the club likely to ask for 2 first-round picks.
The upside in him is going to be quite amazing, so yeah, we'll be looking for the right level of compensation.
The D's now look to finding Jackson's replacement. Brodie Grundy's the front runner. Despite having 5 years to run on a contract, the Pies would have to help pay.
We'll look to replace both the talent and the position. I'm not going to get caught up in specifics, particularly for players that are still contracted.
Freo big man Rory Lobb is yet to announce if he'll request a trade to Victoria.
I haven't really thought about that yet because obviously I've got to do my extra review, so I'll know more by Friday.
West Coast forward Junior Rioli has expressed his desire to join Port Adelaide a week after meeting with the Power. Natalie Yannidis, 7 News.
The Bombers have narrowed down a short list of coaching contenders. Returning to Mitch Cleary. Mitch, you've got fresh details on a new name that's emerged.
Well, Tim, it's St Kilda assistant Brendan Lade who will this week sit down with the Bombers as part of their coaching process. Lade, a premiership teammate of Port Adelaide player Josh Marnie, who is of course leading this Essendon coaching search. Adam Uze is still seen as the favourite, while Dean Solomon, Brad Scott and Don Pike have been linked. James Hurd's name just won't go away. At Collingwood today, Brodie Myercheck was a notable absentee from training. He was later seen with strapping on his knee. There's also a big watch on a big name teammate. On track for around 30 minutes, a moment of intrigue as Braden Maynard left Collingwood's session an hour early after this incident Saturday night.
Just have a look here at Maynard, just grab for the groin.
Jamie Elliott too, sitting out much of the morning, main training to come Thursday before travelling on Friday.
Great time of year, feel like our footy's in pretty good shape at the moment.
The Pies all ears, putting the SCG dimensions to the test.
We felt like probably on the last time we played, we felt like we got stuck on the boundary line a lot and probably exposed us through the middle of the ground.
Jordan De Goey, one man to help, having missed that round 22 loss. The player of the finals to date, still managing his shoulder concern away from the main group. The senior Pies dreaming of turning around that 2018 feeling.
Even chatting to Pendles this time around, we understand we're not probably going to get too many more opportunities. You've got to make the most of your opportunities. The hard stuff's in front of us.
Lance Franklin standing in their way, even after a quiet outing a fortnight ago.
I'm yet to see Lance play 2 bad ones in a row. But yeah, he's been an incredible player.
That happens. It happens even to the best. He's put that behind him. He knows he'll have a
a wonderful opponent again this week, so it doesn't get any easier, but that's what this time of the year is about.
And Mitch, you're across the Jared Berry Tribunal hearing. Are we closing in on a verdict?
Well, Tim, the Lions are doing all they can to get Berry off that contact to the face charge on Melbourne's Clayton Oliver from last week. The Lions are doing all they can to get him off. Luke Hodge has been called upon for a character reference. They've also turned to an independent neurosurgeon to give his take on the matter. Berry arguing he was left in a vulnerable position by Clayton Oliver. The Lions have given their submission, the AFL in turn giving their submission a short time ago. Deliberation not far away. Sticking with the Lions, they've emerged as the front runner for Western Bulldog Josh Dunkley as he weighs up his future. He has met with Brisbane, also over the weekend taking the chance while in South Australia visiting his girlfriend to meet with power players, those senior players including Travis Boak. While the Dogs, they're waiting for a decision from Dunkley. They've today farewelled Luke Beveridge's right-hand man, Chris Maple, the head of coaching operations, farewelled after 14 years at the club. A big watch now on the rest of the Dogs this off-season. Tim?
Thanks, Mitch. Still on AFL, and Zach Tui is counting on a little more than Irish luck this finals campaign. The defender says the Cats' experience in September doesn't matter against the Lions.
Sometimes you can get so caught up in how desperate you are to win it that you let it pass you by, and every year the ladder changes so quickly every season, and teams spring up all over the place with different game styles that you just can't really base much of what you do this year on what went on in the years gone by.
Tui is set to play on next year, breaking the Irish Games record held by Jim Steins. Peter Moody's star galloper Spanish Mission will carry top weight in both the Melbourne Cup and Caulfield Cup. The international stayer will carry 58 kilos on the first Tuesday in November, hoping to improve on last year's third-place finish.
He's a world-class stayer and he gave a world-class performance in last year's renewal of the Melbourne Cup.
Defending champion Very Elegant won't return, while Caulfield Cup champ Incentivize is injured. Carlos Alcaraz took the US Open trophy to New York's Times Square to celebrate his maiden Grand Slam. The 19-year-old officially replaced Leighton Hewitt as the youngest ever world number one. Nick Kyrgios is back inside the top 20 for the first time in 4 years after his run to the quarterfinals. Kyrgios has jumped Alex de Minaur as Australia's highest-ranked male player. Young Bulldog star Bailey Smith has spoken out on the drugs scandal that threatened his career. The 21-year-old, with footy's most famous haircut, today praised supporters for sticking by his side.
One of the most recognisable mullets gets the chop. Almost. Bailey Smith in his first major appearance away from footy since he admitted illicit drug use and was suspended for 2 matches.
To be honest, my life's out there, and I think just not shying away from it is the key. So, I live by that and I stand by that. So, yeah.
The 21-year-old's policy of owning a mistake is paying off. Sponsors stuck with him. Others, like King's Domain Barbershop, want him.
But today we're just going to tidy his hair up, clean it up.
New hair products and a news conference in a strange matchup.
No, I know, it's funny. Yeah, I know, it's not typical, but it's all right.
One of the AFL's biggest stars has girlfriend Gemma by his side. In footy's off-season, he'll happily trade the spotlight for sunlight.
Go away at some point, get a bit of a tan. I think I'm due. I think everyone's due. It's a bit cold in Melbourne. I'm sick of it, mate. Yeah.
The chunk missing from his eyebrow, the result of a Mad Monday dare. As for what Bailey Smith looks like without the mullet, he'll keep you waiting.
We got something in the works. Some point next year, I reckon.
Blake Johnson, 7 News.
Can't wait for that, Mitch. Something new next year.
With or without, do you think? He looks better.
No, I like a good mullet.
Oh, do you? You're going to grow one yourself.
It's a bit late for that.
My grandson has a mullet, would you believe? Thanks very much, Tim.
I can believe that.
Jane is next with the forecast. And Jane, it looks like it's warming up.
Richard, that is right indeed. Temperatures jump up tomorrow, but there's a chilly night to get through first. The full details are next.
Tonight, on the latest from 7 News, Scots are saying their final goodbyes before the Queen's coffin leaves for London in the coming hours. Details on the major operation to bring it back to Buckingham Palace, plus pictures from Belfast as we see them, the next stop in the King's UK tour. When it happens, we'll have it at 10:20.
As the world watches the heralding in of a new era.
You'll see everything unfolding in the UK overnight, first on Sunrise.
Hello again. We have warmth and sunshine on the way, but there's a chilly night to get through first. The city fell to 6 before dawn this morning and it only reached 12.7. That's 4 degrees below average. In that cold air, we still had the odd shower passing through this morning. Then it turned all dry, but areas of cloud lingered until late afternoon. Now, this is what it looked like in Ballarat this morning. Sky all clear, barely a gust of wind. But that let the temperature drop to -1. There was frost on the grass. There were many other inland areas that were frosty this morning. The top of Mount Buller plummeted to -7. Now, skies are now clearing over the city. Out there now, it is currently 10 degrees and tumbling. Now it's dark. Latest guidance shows the city is likely to drop right down to 3. That'll be freezing in outer suburbs. The wind and showers eased as a high pressure system came in, but it's only a short break and the next system is a big one. The low that is driving all of this stays back over the Bight. Now that tells us it'll affect us for several days. It comes through in bursts, about 4 of them, with dry breaks in between, but it lasts right through to the end of the weekend. We're currently in what's known as a negative Indian Ocean dipole. That makes the Indian Ocean send these parts excess rain in winter and spring. Now we've entered the next La Nina, so the Pacific Ocean is going to send these areas excess rain in spring and summer. Now it is not wet all the time, but wetter than average overall. Around the nation tomorrow, dry in Brisbane, mostly dry in Sydney. Wet in Adelaide, that's the wet weather day there. Showers tending to persistent rain, the risk of a thunderstorm. It is showery over in Perth. To Victoria, tomorrow morning's frost, that's over central and eastern parts, along with patches of fog. Now that's where the clear and calm air is at first. Then cloud slowly builds from the west as northerly winds become breezy. Rain is likely in the west during the afternoon, spreading to central parts at night and not reaching the east until after midnight after a sunny day. There could be a thunderstorm late in the northwest. Closer in tomorrow during the day, it is completely dry. Sunshine for much of it before cloud builds late afternoon. Get the clothes on the line, they'll dry thanks to a breezy northerly wind, but bring them in before dark as rain moves through at night. The city quickly thaws out and it rises to 19. It is dry all day and sunny for much of it. Then light and patchy rain arrives after dark. To the 8-day outlook, that light and patchy rain does continue into Thursday morning. It's likely to clear by lunchtime on Thursday, and then we'll actually have lots of sunshine, so expect that sun to return so it jumps back up to 19. On Friday, dry at first, then wet in the afternoon and evening, lots of showers as it turns colder, so about 14 on Saturday, lots of showers redeveloping and continuing on Sunday. So after a chilly start tomorrow, we're rising right up to 19. It's dry all day and sunny for much of it. Then that rain arrives after dark, Mitch.
And a wetter than average spring and summer, is that what we're saying?
That's what we're looking at. Not wet all the time, only when the lows come by. But when they do, they'll tap into that moisture. It'll be heavier than usual.
I'll get through tonight's low of 3 first.
Good, that's a good start.
Other stuff. Thank you very much, Jane. And that's the way it is this Tuesday, the 13th of September. Thanks for your company. For now, from the 7 News team, good night.